Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders and investors to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Thomas, or Thomas, the CEO of EcoTree. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
You have a very inspiring story, and I love your t-shirt just to create some suspense and some curiosity for the ones who are watching on YouTube. May the forest be with you, EcoTree, and one of your forests that you will explain later what I'm talking about behind you. It seems that you are a rich guy with a lot of forests across the world, and you are helping nature to have a great life in planet Earth.
Yeah,
and the human race.
In case you haven't noticed, we're going to talk about forest today.
Exactly, and climate tech. But before going there, let's start by understanding a little bit more of your background. You have a very international background, different positions. You had your own companies as well. You've been professional CEO and now leading EcoTree as a founder and CEO in the climate tech space. So, but let us know more about you, Thomas.
Yeah, well, as you said, I'm very European in a way because I'm half French, half Austrian. I grew up in Paris, but my mother was from Vienna in Austria. So I grew up in a French-German environment, you could say. And now after a few years here and there, I've been settling down in Denmark. So I'm Danish by adoption now, in a way you could say. So yeah, I'm sort of a combination of those different cultures now. I'm 45. I have 3 very nice kids, and indeed, so I started with a quite classic both political science and economical background through my studies. Quite originally, I started my career by just taking a year off and traveling the world for 1 year. I'm a big ski and mountain fan, so together with my brother and our best friend, we decided to go, travel the world to ski in the best places around the globe for like a year, and that was definitely a fantastic adventure. And somehow, I think I can say that part, at least, of my passion for nature comes from that experience of being out there and living the outdoor life for a while. But then I needed still to sort of make a living, and so I've been basically an entrepreneur throughout my whole career. And EcoTree, we'll get into that now, but it's sort of my third main venture, I could say. To give you sort of a little retrospective and to understand what I've been through and where I come from. I started actually initially with a sourcing and trading business in China, in Hong Kong, where I also lived a couple of years. Where basically I was like sourcing and trading different type of commodities produced in Asia for typically European companies. Not 100% environmental friendly, if I look back very honestly. Then again, it was in the early 2000s, and I think the focus back then, at least it was for me and my team, was on the social conditions and the social impact that producing, outsourcing in emerging countries was having. Was not that much yet focused on the environment. And then after a few successful years, I moved on. We moved to Switzerland. My wife is a Danish diplomat, so she got a position in Geneva. So we moved to Switzerland. Then I took over together with some investors a tech firm, sort of a spin-off from the Polytechnic School of Lausanne. A bit more environmental friendly that way because it was actually a sort of remote. It was within the IoT, the Internet of Things, and it was a sort of remote sensing solution for energy consumptions for buildings, houses, etc. So already there was, I think, a little switch towards
we're getting closer.
Exactly, more environmental friendly solutions. And after that turnaround, I joined my friends and partners at EcoTree. So where I think actually ultimately I managed to combine my passion for nature, as I said, and for entrepreneurship.
That is a great story, and you have been in China when it was really the boom, and a lot of courage also to move to China, I assume, at a time where it was difficult to survive if you were not able to speak a little bit of Mandarin.
Yeah, it was quite well. It was exciting, I would say, more than challenging. It was definitely exciting. Also, I was in my early 20s, so I had this
great.
mindset that sky is the limit. You're not afraid of making mistakes, and I did make
Awesome.
quite a
Great
lot.
move.
I had my bunch of mistakes, obviously, but it was fascinating. Just exposing yourself to different culture, different ways of working, and indeed trying to leverage an obvious boom, right, in that country. Everything has seen the rise of China and Asia globally, so it was quite exciting and fantastic to witness that and somehow to be part of that.
Absolutely, that sounds fantastic. And we know that climate tech is super important nowadays, given the huge problems that we all are facing as a society and as the world. And for the ones who might be thinking that you are quite early stage, you are already post Series B. So where are you in terms of stage of growth with EcoTree?
Yeah, we're more like a scale up than a pure startup, to be precise. We started in 2016, right? So we're in our 7th, 8th year now of operations. We started in France, our historical and domestic market, back in end of 2019, beginning of 2020. In the middle of the COVID, we decided to start an international expansion, at least on the European market. So now we're aiming to become sort of a number one provider of what we call the nature-based solution in Europe. So we have now, well, of course, obviously we'll discuss more about our model and all that, but in terms of where we are now in our startup journey, we are indeed around 100 teammates throughout 3 offices, France and Denmark. We are indeed a post Series B. We've been lucky and smart, I think, to start the Series B round earlier, mid of last year. And we had basically after a seed round when we started, we had a Series A round for roughly 3 million euros in end of 2019, basically for the launch of our international go-to-market. And so, mid last year, we had a Series B for roughly 20 million euros with our existing and also new investors.
Sounds fantastic. So, and let's give a step back to understand a little bit more the product, the business model, the vision, and how EcoTree is really having an impact in the world.
I'd say it all started with a sort of a frustration, which was that we talk about sustainability and environmental friendliness very much, but we, at the end of the day, achieve pretty little. So for us, the challenge was like the frustration was how to convert, how to turn all those, this awareness that finally the world has today when it comes to the environmental crisis, and turn that into concrete and immediate action, right? How to close that gap. And we realized that one of the ways to do that, beside having local initiatives, highly qualitative initiatives, obviously, one of the best trigger we had at hand was actually using financial incentive. To get more companies and individuals, because we literally want everyone to do something. We thought that financial incentive was the best way to get everyone engaged, basically. With this regard, we actually got inspired by the Scandinavian recycling system for used cans and bottles, which is very advanced in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany. And we realized that it's a perfect way to actually monetize the act of recycling. And the countries with an advanced recycling system like this one, where you basically, for those who are not familiar with this, you pay a sort of little deposit when you purchase your beer or Coca-Cola or bottle of water. And then you get actually that little deposit back when you return it for proper recycling, right? And we realized that the countries with such an advanced system have above an average 90 to 95% return, while a company without system, like France, where I come from, I think roughly below 50% or something. So, and that's really what hit our mind when we realized that actually a little financial incentive, right, can trigger a tremendously different environmental friendly behavior. And we decided to apply that proven method of financial incentive to tree planting and sustainable forestry. So we basically managed, took quite some time to and legal and financial expertise to build this model up, but we've managed to basically make it possible for anyone, again, individuals or firms, to buy newly planted trees from our forest, get all the obvious, tangible environmental benefit that sustainable forestry can deliver, but also that little perspective of a financial gain on the long run. Because the way it works, pretty simple. You own the trees, you become what we call the tree owner. So you're not sponsoring, right? We're moving away from the classic philanthropic donation model. You actually own the tree, you're a tree owner, whether it's one tree, hundreds or thousands of trees, you own them. And so when it's our team, obviously, of forestry experts who take care of those trees throughout the life cycle. And once they reach maturity, we selectively cut and harvest them, right? We never do clear cuts, obviously, but this would be quite unsustainable. So we do selective thinnings, as it's called. And once your trees are harvested, we hand over 100% of that revenue to you, the tree owner, right? It's your tree, it's your timber, so it's your revenue. So it's obviously long-term. We all know that trees take time or need time to grow, but when they do, well, they have a real commercial value. So you will ultimately more than double your initial investment. It's roughly 2% financial gain per year that you can expect from owning a tree and owning the corresponding timber. So, well, it is indeed long-term, but yeah, it's not too bad for doing the planet and ourselves a favor, right?
Right, and I think there an IP, right? I think it's quite interesting what you just mentioned about the way recycling works in the Nordics. By the way, for the ones who are listening, to get better context, Thomas, as you said, you are half French, half Austrian. Sorry,
Austrian.
thank you. And you are based in Copenhagen nowadays, as you are married to a Danish diplomat. So I think that there a very interesting IP that you were able to convert into your business model, and to also reward the ones who are doing good for nature, to also have a kind of a return on investment. That it will not be the main purpose to invest on the trees, but at least you feel that you also get a little bit of ROI making the difference, right?
Yeah, you're right, and obviously, I mean, our customers' primary motivation is not to make money. Well, they are quicker, or smarter way to make money these days. So the primary motivation of our customers is environmental, but again, it still makes a bit slightly more sense for them to do it with us, with this financial gain perspective on top of it, rather than money out of the window, even though it's a green window, you could say.
Right. And how it works in terms of, do you serve more B2C, more B2B? So how does that work?
Yeah, well, ultimately, as I said, right, by trying to fill this gap between awareness, good intentions, and action, we really want to get everyone on board. Obviously, that's how we're going to get the biggest impact. This being said, it's been actually we're addressing both segments, right, B2B and B2C, you could say. And interestingly enough, it's been fluctuating a bit. Quite transparently, or honestly, at the very beginning, we wanted to start with companies, and didn't really work out. I think maybe we've been after the big ones while we were like almost a non-existing little startup with maybe a good idea, but no real track record yet and all that. So we're not really convincing. But then we had in France a sort of a media exposure through a few actually media and TV interviews, because our model was like quite original, and that suddenly triggered quite a strong traction on the B2C segment, right? Where we saw a lot of individuals actually starting to get trees and buying trees from us. So we said, okay, well, that actually works. So let's pivot in a way, and let's definitely put more eggs into that basket.
Right.
So we developed the B2C segment, and also the small and small and medium-sized companies. And I think that has proven to be pretty efficient, because that's how we managed, to generate a steady revenue stream. And that's also what has built our credibility and our brand awareness, which after a couple of years has made it quite more natural and much more successful to address the bigger firms and the bigger corporate companies. And now today, just to give you an idea, we've roughly 60,000 individuals, customers, and close to 1,300 companies, literally from SMEs to multinationals.
Incredible, the power of PR, of a great story, of people wanting to be part of a movement, and then coming a movement of inbound. And after that, I like the way you explained me also the dynamics. So how individuals then will also promote initiative across companies and kind of bring companies to the equation, and vice versa. How some decision makers that will bring this solution to companies people will also want to be part of the movement individually, not only as a part of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it, and well, even though today, like roughly 80% of our revenue comes actually now from the B2B segment, so it is definitely stronger, and it's going to remain so to we believe over the next couple of years. This being said, we indeed like this. I think the technique, in the jargon, is called B2B to C or B2C to B, meaning that indeed, whenever we deal with a company, well, then all the employees within that company are very likely to become individual customers. Similarly, when we have individuals, engaging with us, well, we often see that they report that to their employer, to their managers, and then that company becomes a corporate client. So we like that kind of natural synergies. Again, our aim is to have everyone on board. So however, which angle we enter, it all works out ultimately.
And in terms of difference, is there any difference in terms of the kind of the pricing or the product or the business model that you kind of present to companies and the ones you present to individuals? Or?
No, not really. So it's maybe the type of, or the type of engagement. Like the two main offerings that work best for individuals is the gifting. So you buy a tree and then you can give it to your nephew for a birthday, a baptism, or whatever celebration you want to greenify. It's kind of the perfect, sustainable, and meaningful and surprising gift these days. So that works pretty sweetly.
I love the creativity. That's very original. Definitely, it will make an impact. Nobody will forget that you gave them a tree for their birthday.
and like most of the gifts that take some dust and end up in the trash, this one will actually gain value and thrive, right? So that works pretty well. And then we even have this subscription model where you can decide how many trees you want to invest in on a monthly basis, and off you go, building your little forest, your little own forest, month after month. So those are maybe the two main offerings, the two most popular offerings on the B2C side. And for companies, we have the tree gift, the corporate gift, works as well, pretty much, replacing mugs or chocolate box by trees is also quite popular these days. We have the whole customer incentive or customer loyalty engagement traction, where you use basically the engagement power of trees to encourage certain behavior. If you want your customers to go paperless, for example, well, you reward them by offering them trees or by planting trees. I mean, all that is also pretty strong. And last but not least, especially these days where there's a lot of focus about carbon sequestration, we're also able to develop, to issue carbon removal credits, which are European-based, highly qualitative, because again, our projects deliver a lot of environmental positive impact. And well, again, they sort of pay for themselves because they will ultimately generate a revenue stream. So you ultimately get paid for sequestering carbon after all. Those are the sort of the main drivers. And then, of course, again, because we tried really to have the most positive impact possible on natural ecosystems, we have also a strong focus on biodiversity, right? It's not just about optimizing carbon sequestration. Trees and forests are really good in that. Obviously, forests are the second largest carbon sink on Earth after the oceans, but more actionable than oceans. But it is, for us, it's also about restoring and preserving biodiversity. So we have a lot of local initiatives to, again, enhance and strengthen and restore and preserve biodiversity. And a lot of our customers also engage in sponsoring these type of initiatives.
Right. we were joking a bit that we don't know anymore how to classify your company, because it's kind of climate tech, impact tech, fintech as well, because there is kind of investment part of the business model. And then there is this play of if this is a tech company or a tech enabled company, as you need also in terms of expectations, there is a need in terms of speed of growth. You need to buy land, and you need to or to rent land. Can you explain a little bit more how it works, and how can you make it scalable, and how it differs from the pure tech super scalable company?
Yes, you're right. We're sometimes struggling in defining which sort of tech it is. I like to joke about the fact that, well, ultimately we're using Mother Nature's tech, right? Okay. Photosynthesis, and that is 4.5 billion years of free R&D, research and development that we're using.
Exactly. And with very innovative solutions, I must say. So you just gave a couple of, or more than a couple of examples of a way how to make Mother Nature very sexy for the consumer.
Yeah, indeed. So that's our main tech, I love to say. But this being said, the way we use tech is to try to, tech is good in connecting things or people, right? Basically, and when you connect, you care. So when you come to the environmental actions, I think using tech is quite something that can have actually a very positive impact. So the way we use tech is by digitalizing the experience of being a tree owner, geolocalizing new trees. We're testing a lot of technical features. For example, we have made a pretty popular replica of the famous Google Street View feature, right? We call it Forest View, where exactly like on Street View, you can make a sort of a 360-degree screen, and you can double click and jump 20 meters ahead in the forest, and here's a tree, you can click on it, you get a pop-up about what type of tree it is. So this type of thing. We're also testing a sort of insect radar to monitor the flight, the traffic of pollinizator, because they are also vital for nature and ecosystems. We're about to use like satellite and drone imagery to monitor the growth of biomass and the corresponding carbon sequestration from trees. So, we try to use tech whenever relevant. So in that sense, we are a tech company, but as you implied, we are not. This being said, we don't have necessarily the scalability of a pure SaaS model. If we are a SaaS model, then we have sustainability as a service. So we don't have that scalability of just plugging a few more servers and taking in 10,000 more customers overnight, because ultimately, our operations are on the ground, on the field. We need to acquire land. Because we haven't been yet specific on that, but the way we make it possible for anyone to buy, one tree by the unit, is using a sort of a legal distinction between the ground ownership and the so-called surface ownership. And even though trees are obviously rooted in the ground, they are part of the surface ownership, meaning that we typically own the land, or third parties own the land, and we sell the trees as part of the surface, and that enables us to sell trees by unit with VAT and one invoice, basically. While before model, trees and forest have always been a fairly attractive class of asset, but it was a real estate investment, basically. So, with all the very capital intensive, long transaction, and it was reserved, it was a niche, you could say. And you do have a lot of wealthy old families or well-established large companies that actually do own forest as an asset, but the entry ticket was super high. What we've made basically now, in a few clicks, as low as 15 euros, you can actually now start buying one tree by the unit. And that legal mechanism behind, actually, it's not such an innovation, because actually we've been digging out an old article from the French Civil Code back in 1855. So here again, you can be creative without necessarily reinventing the wheel. I think this is something we've learned and we've tried to apply to ourselves. So that's kind of how it works, right? So ultimately, to come back to your question, well, whatever the tech we're using, that is still a reality. We need land, we need to plant those trees, we need to care for them over years and years and years. So that makes the scalability not the same as a classic fintech basically could deliver.
Right. And you need always to buy the land, or is there any other way of being able to use the land without buying it?
Well, most of the time so far, we have roughly 50 projects in Europe, okay. Planted 1.5 million trees so far, roughly. In most of the cases, we actually do own the land, right? Yeah. But in order to scale, well, because it is capital intensive and there are some opportunities that we cannot always get our hands on, we've developed a sort of a land management agreement model where we team up with third parties, that landowners, right? Imagine you have a piece of land that you don't necessarily know what to do with it. Well, we can make a deal together where we just need to secure the long-term usage of that ground, so that in 20 years you don't change your mind, or your children or whoever inherits it change their mind. We have to secure that is our commitment to our clients, that once we start a project, we aim for permanent forest coverage, right? So there will always be that thriving forest there. So we need to secure that, obviously legally, but then there's a sort of a profit sharing, so that it's also interesting for you. And then we run the model on your land, right? So that is a model that enables us to scale and have more opportunities throughout our targeted market. So if anyone out there has a land that is misused or that they want at least to have a positive impact with, still owning it and having a sort of general revenue stream, reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss it.
It's super interesting because, as you explained, there is a lot of tech IP that can use to be able to make the business model work better and to provide a better experience also to the tree owners and to the customers. And the business model itself also has a lot of innovation, but I like also the inspiration on stuff that has been here for a very long time. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, well, the inspiration I mentioned about this financial, method with the recycling system, using Mother Nature's technology, or using an old article from 200 years ago. Again, I think, and that's a valuable lesson, I believe, for everyone out there. Being creative and being innovative doesn't necessarily mean reinventing the wheel. At least it hasn't worked that way for us.
Exactly. And this is a category that is growing super quickly, and we know why it is growing so much. We really need to solve a lot of these big problems. How has been your experience so far raising money on this category, and what has been the main lessons so far? Maybe you can share a bit your journey in terms of you shared in the beginning, but a little bit more.
It's been a very positive journey in different ways. First of all, I think it's because we have anticipated enough the fundraising milestones. I always remember something my father told me, which is like bankers or investors, it's like the dentist, you need to go before it hurts.
Wow.
So that's a very, very wise one, I can tell you that. So we've been, I guess, smart enough to always engage in fundraising discussions before we were like a knife under the throat or close to be cashed out. So that means that we have been able to have we have the luxury to be somehow picky on who we wanted to have on board. So that is definitely a recommendation I can give to any startup or entrepreneur out there. Secure your cash is king, and do that with a lot of anticipation, especially what's for sure, and that maybe here in our case, the fact that we actually, for 5 co-founders, is an asset, because it is super time consuming to do fundraising, right? It's dozens and dozens of meetings and roadshow and all that. So there's the risk, it's well known, but there's definitely a risk of defocusing the management, from the business, from growing the business, if you spend too much time on trying to get investors. So at the end of the day, you risk having no business anymore. I'm simplifying a bit, but I think there have been a lot of examples there. So also make sure not to defocus, or to have the proper allocation of your time and resources. And well, for us in our field, sustainability or environmental friendly solutions clearly have a sort of a good momentum. You've seen, well, it's not the whole crypto, Web3 as well, but that one is kind of, let's say, shaked a bit recently. the environmental one, I think, has definitely, as a business field, has clearly, I think, a major perspective ahead. Well, I wish it was not the case, because that means it's because we have an issue that we need to fix. So I wish it wasn't that much of a thing, but it is. So from a purely business and entrepreneurship perspective, I think it's a great field, and there is still a good momentum in this field particularly. And then for us, I think what was interesting in especially in the last round, where we would expect classic VC to join, and even like impact VC, you have more and more of those out there on the market.
Right.
We ended up as lead investor with CVC, so a corporate fund, a French bank. Société Générale, I'm happy to name them. They are a great partner. And what was interesting for them, it was interesting to see that unlike more classic VC, who, well, obviously will expect quite a strong return in a short period of time, we could sense that they were definitely with us on the long run, because, well, they obviously also here for a return on their investment, obviously, for sure. They know what this means, being a bank, a financial institution. But I mean, ultimately, their primary motivation was to, use our solution for their own portfolio, or private or primarily corporate customers. So there was a quite natural alignment of our long-term perspective. I mean, we are obviously working with nature. So as I mentioned, it's long-term perspective. So it was great to have this alignment between them as investor and us and our business roadmap. And that works as well for previous or existing investors, but it was great on that round to be able to align. So maybe a piece of advice as well, make sure you align somehow with your own business, roadmap and ambition with the investors you're getting on board. Otherwise it can quickly become quite shaky.
That's an interesting reflection about what you should consider in a climate tech venture, more if impact VCs or pure financial VCs, or strategic or corporate VCs or CVCs, right? I think that's a great example. So you had kind of a combination more of impact VCs and corporate VCs, or also pure financial VCs in your journey so far?
Initially, we started looking for more classic VCs, or at least impact VCs that would have been an obvious preferred area, a preferred profile of VCs. But we ended up even like shortlisted 2 CVCs, and then it became quite natural that, and also to be pretty bold about this point, or transparent, but classic VCs have some difficulties to value companies like ours, or companies in the environmental field, because, well, first, we don't have the track record that you have on more classic startup fields like fintechs, for example, and the scalability is not the one that, as I mentioned before, that you can expect from more classic SaaS-oriented business. So the current and ultimate valuation of a company like ours, or for startups in our field, is, I think, more tricky than it used to be. Or than it is for other fields. And here, a CVC or corporate fund, well, again, they are not so much here for the return or looking at the future valuation of your company. They're here because they're here for the synergies, because they know throughout the journey they will benefit from your solution. So in a way, what they do is, I think they buy themselves an access to your solution at a preferred price ultimately, rather than trying to get a crazy return that would be difficult to evaluate for them. That was sort of our analysis, and honestly, we haven't expected that. That's something we discovered or came up with throughout the process. So we became smarter throughout the process, as usual.
It's very interesting. Also, be part of their CSR activities, right?
Exactly.
The impact that they are having, and we know nowadays it has started for corporates, but it's becoming more and more important, especially with the net zero trends. What are the initiatives that those large corporates are doing in order to reduce their carbon footprint, or having a net zero carbon footprint?
Yeah, and it's funny because we're not that old, obviously, right? But even since 2016 and at the start of our operations, we've really seen quite a major switch on how corporates approach sustainability, and it has been from a nice to have clearly to a must have. So now, whether they like it, whether they do it because they want it or because they do it because they have to, either way, we sense now that's why there's such a strong momentum. And it's even on a regulatory aspect right now. The CSRD directive about extra financial reporting, starting with the bigger corporations, but will naturally, cascade down to smaller entities. And it would in no time, everyone would literally have to take that into consideration as a strategic imperative and not just a nice to have it, as it may have been in the past.
Right. And something super interesting that you said is the company was founded by 5 co-founders. I know that's the size of the team around. It's around 100 people already. And I think that for the ones who are listening, it's also interesting to know more about that story, because it's very unusual. Typically, we have the 2-3 member founding team structure. So how did you end up being 5 co-founders, and how do you split responsibilities across the founding team?
It is indeed I guess, a fairly original setup, you could say. But it came quite naturally, in the sense that it was a good timing, a good alignment of planet for the different ones at that time. And I think the most important part is actually the complementarity of our profiles. That's usually the way it works with co-founders. But if you look at what we do, I mean, we have, even though we're 100 teammates, right? And we still have a lot of, we're not like a law firm where 90% of the teammates are lawyers, or an engineer firm or a tech firm, right? Where you have like the developers, or, we have among 100 people, we have like literally as a forestry people, obviously, a great deal of them. We have legal expertise, we have financial expertise, we have tech expertise, we have sales and marketing expertise. So we have a great deal of expertise to run a business model like ours.
Right.
And that's reflected in a way. That's why you need like 4 or 5 co-founders to somehow have and lead those different expertises in-house, right? So I think that complementarity has been key, but has definitely been mandatory, considering again the wide area of expertise that we cover doing what we do.
Yeah. And have you been growing the headcount slowly, or did you see any kind of aggressive growth in terms of headcount in the last years?
Well, no, yeah, I think last year, both in anticipation and then after the Series B fundraising, so throughout the year 2022, that's where we've seen most of the growth, in terms of, there's been a bit more than doubling up throughout that year.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Which is a challenge, obviously, of course, as well, right?
We could have an episode
too fast, exactly, and
just about it.
We've made actually an interesting organizational switch throughout that process, moving from having the French entity, the sort of the mother main domestic home market, and then the international entities with the new markets, where we end up somehow, a bit duplicating resources and expertises. We've last summer have sort of, turned the matrix down and organized now by business units, so market and sales, product and innovation, business administration, communication, tech, and they run throughout the whole organization, whether you're sitting in Copenhagen in charge of the Scandinavian markets, or whether you are sitting in Paris. So it's now a much more cross-standardized, harmonized, and cross-country organization per business unit, and not per markets anymore. And this has been an important, but I think quite a vital switch a couple of months ago.
Got it. And it's interesting. We could already also do a deep dive on that, right? Because sometimes when you are a small organization, the squads might work better for everyone to be aligned, but at a certain point you need to start having kind of some economies of scale and having some policies around the functions to help the company proceed. And then maybe a little bit later you will have a crisis that maybe you need to go back to squads in order to make the organization more agile. So which is kind of curious, right? It's kind of almost an organizational design discipline that is super important.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any perfect scheme or scenario that works all the time. But for us, it became quite obvious that this was the best way to move forward. And it is always the trick when you try to internationalize your activity, is where to put the cursor between duplicating what works, right, and obviously scaling and having economy of scales on what you do or the way you operate, but still give some room to the local specificities of a market, right? And that is definitely, even for us, like for everyone out there, I think the most difficult challenge. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's go to the last segment of the show, Thomas, where we do your ping pong of quick questions and answers. So if you'd have the opportunity to meet yourself for the coffee in 2016 when you started EcoTree, what advice would you offer to your younger Thomas?
I think I would tell him not to be afraid of mistakes. I think I'm a sort of a perfectionist guy, so I love this mindset of trying to gather the best resources and come up with the best solution possible. That's, I think, my natural inclination, and I've learned, and I would definitely tell myself, my younger self, it's okay to rather do with minimal resources and come up with a minimum viable product, the MVP as it's called, and build from them, test and learn, instead of trying to come up with a perfect solution upfront, right? I think that would be the best piece of advice I could give myself. I've learned it the hard way.
Love it. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
I think it's the enthusiasm that we get around what we do, whether it's within our teammates or customers. When I see my teammates every day, or when we're on site with our customers that sometimes come and help do some planting days with us. That excitement, that passion, being able to share that passion that we obviously have, but that we should be able to share it, I think that's the greatest part of it. That's what's makes me wake up and go to work with a smile every day.
Yeah, and you can see that everyone that connects with this movement gets excited about it. Of course, even myself, and you could also see I'm not kind of journalist, but the press was also interested to cover the story. So I think that everyone connects in a certain way, and that is great, right? So because you feel part of a much bigger movement, not only customers and employees, but almost all stakeholders. Worst advice ever received?
Wait a bit. So again, back to what I said a bit before, wait for the perfect moment. There's never a perfect moment. Oh, you just keep waiting all the time. I think at some point you have to just dare and do it, and whatever comes out, you'll handle it. You'll be fine.
Exactly, and get the feedback and learn from the feedback.
Exactly. So just don't wait.
Exactly. And finally, the resources, your favorite book, business or non-business, you decide.
Yeah, no, it's a non-business one. It's a French one. It's called La Panthère des Neiges, so the Snow Panther, from a great French author, Sylvain Tesson. And it's an interesting book because I'm not a big reader, to be honest, I'll admit. And this one is literally all about that guy that goes and try to ambush this, just to see her, the famous Snow Panther, who's obviously a very rare animal in Central Asia. And the book is just about basically his waiting to possibly see that animal. So it looks like, for me, the most possible boring book ever. But beside the fact that it's absolutely beautifully written, I really like the idea of the ambush, or the lookout. And as he suggests throughout this book, I have tried to practice that in my everyday life. We're in an epoch where every 3 seconds that we have, we rush to our phone to address. We just don't accept to have the mind, floating. And what he learned me, I think, through this book, and I'm very grateful for that, was to take those moments whenever you queue in a restaurant or a shop or wherever, to take those moments to try to, like an ambush or someone for the lookout, try to spot the things that you wouldn't have seen. And this little game with myself, I think, has become sort of habit, and I love that, and I'm really grateful for that book to have given me that opportunity.
It's the eyes of a baby, always, right? So always seeing things for the first time. Your favorite movie or series?
Well, my favorite movie is Interstellar from Nolan. I guess everyone's familiar with this one. I think it's just a fantastically made, and it's really a film where I remember when I came out of this, I was like, woof, I needed like half an hour just to come back to Earth, literally. So I think it's one of the movies that got my mind like so far away. I had to, put it back. The way it plays with time and also the loved ones is like, being a father of three. I mean, it touches it puts so many crazy strings in my mind that I think that's my favorite movie. So I've seen it quite a few times.
Amazing. And finally, your favorite podcast, excluding this one.
Yeah, beside this one, right? No, I think it's also a French one. Sorry for my Frenchness, but it's called C'est dans l'air. It's a political daily podcast. And what I like is that they gather a bunch of experts around the table for not an hour, so it's fairly long. But I literally listen to it every day, and they sort of try to decrypt, something happening in the news. Not necessarily the top news, but something that is obviously happening these days. And when there's so much nows out there, and again, back to what I said, so much, need an answer right now. It's so much simplifying. I love having to take experts taking in a gentle, smart, intelligent way, taking 1 hour to deep dive into something that I feel makes me smarter. So I love that one.
Great one. Could you repeat the name of the podcast?
C'est dans l'air. It means it's in the air.
Got it. Just for the ones who are also able to speak French.
Yeah, it's in French. Sorry for that.
That's why we also have a French audience. And even the ones who are not French will speak French. So it can be also interesting to them. Thomas, thanks so much for making the time. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show, and all the best for the upcoming chapters. And again, may the forest be with you.
Thank you so much indeed. May the forest be with us and be with you.
And to our community, thanks for being there. We keep bringing you the best of the best to make your life a little bit easier as you scale up your company. See you soon and keep scaling.